I stood at the edge of my property, heart pounding in my chest, staring at the bright green sign that had been hammered into the dirt overnight. Welcome to Greenleaf Community Public Dog Park, HOA property. HOA property. Public Dog Park? I nearly dropped my coffee mug. This was my ranch. Land that had been in my family for 4 generations. They couldn't just steal it like this. But they had. Somehow, while I'd been busy fixing up the back barn and helping my neighbor with her broken fence, the HOA had gone behind my back and filed some shady paperwork. A few slick signatures, a fake plat map, and poof, according to the city records, that section of my land now belonged to the HOA. The worst part? That stolen section wasn't just any piece of my land. It was the part with the main water access. That well and irrigation line served half the HOA's fancy homes downhill. And now, they'd fenced it all off, torn up my crops, leveled the earth, and installed doggy waste bins and picnic tables. I even saw a pair of bored teenagers throwing a frisbee while 2 dogs peed on my old barn foundation. My fists clenched so hard, my knuckles turned white. I didn't scream. I didn't cause a scene. But I made a decision right then and there. If they wanted a dog park so badly, fine. But they were going to find out exactly what happens when you bite the hand that waters you. I walked away without a word, went back inside my house, and pulled open the old filing cabinet my grandfather used to keep every document, map, and contract related to this land. Within 10 minutes, I found what I needed: the water rights. Turns out, back in 1971, my grandfather had signed a private easement agreement that allowed the HOA access to our underground well, for a small fee each year. And that agreement? It was revocable, with one simple form. All I had to do was revoke the access. And that's exactly what I planned to do. But before I get too ahead of myself, let me tell you how it all started. Because this wasn't just a story about revenge or water. This was a story about pride, history, betrayal, and yes, a little bit of good old-fashioned karma. See, my name is Hank Miller. I'm a 57-year-old rancher living just outside of Ashford, Texas. My wife passed 10 years ago, God rest her soul, and my only son, Mason, lives up in Dallas where he works as a civil engineer. So it's just me and the land now, and I've always loved it that way. Our ranch, Miller Acres, sits just on the edge of a growing suburban development called Greenleaf Estates. 20 years ago, it was just trees, fields, and a few dusty roads. But now, it's become a hotbed for city folks trying to play cowboy. HOA boards, golf carts, solar-paneled roofs, and folks who call the sheriff when a rooster crows too loud. At first, I tried to be neighborly. I helped them patch fences, let their kids ride my horses during summer, even donated hay during a drought. But the more houses they built, the more entitled they became. They started complaining about the smell of my cows, the dust on their Teslas, the unsightly tractors I kept in view of their kitchen windows. One woman, a sharp-nosed blonde named Cheryl, who was president of the HOA, even came over once with a clipboard and said, "Mr. Miller, have you ever considered turning your ranch into something more modern, like a community garden or a dog park?" I laughed in her face. Apparently, she didn't like that. I didn't hear much more from her after that, until last week. That's when the signs appeared, and the fence, and the bulldozers. They moved fast, too fast. It was almost like they knew I wouldn't be able to stop them. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not clueless. I know land disputes happen. But this one was personal. The HOA had always hated that my land wasn't under their control. They tried to pressure me into joining their association years ago. I refused. So what did they do? They used a legal loophole. Cheryl and her crew forged a revised neighborhood plan that claimed part of my land had been mistakenly left off their map. They submitted it to a city official who, probably tired or bribed, didn't notice the change. Suddenly, the HOA had legal claim over 12 acres of my ranch, and they turned it into a public dog park. They didn't ask. They didn't pay. They didn't warn me. They just took it. I remember standing there on that first morning, boots sinking into freshly flattened dirt, staring at a woman tossing a tennis ball to her golden retriever. The ball bounced off a rusted water pump, one that connected directly to the line feeding the HOA neighborhood. She smiled at me like she owned the place. I didn't smile back. I went home. And I started digging, not just into paperwork, but into old memories. I remembered my grandfather telling me how he built that irrigation system by hand, how he let the nearby community tap into the water back when folks still respected each other. That pipeline, the one that ran right through the stolen dog park, was the HOA's lifeline. And I held the valve. I spent the next day consulting a lawyer. A good one. She nearly jumped out of her seat when she saw the easement agreement. "They can't do this," she said. "They violated the terms. You have every right to revoke access, immediately." I signed the papers. That night I went out to the old maintenance shed, unlocked the rusted chain on the main valve box, and placed a fresh metal cover on top, one that locked. Then I turned off the water. Completely. By sunrise, over 80 homes had no water. Toilets didn't flush. Faucets ran dry. Sprinklers sputtered. And boy, the panic set in fast. I stood on my porch, sipping coffee, watching a parade of confused HOA residents gather near the new dog park entrance. Cheryl showed up in a Lexus, stormed out in high heels, and started yelling into her phone. And that was just the beginning. But before I tell you what happened next, and trust me, it gets wild, you should know one more thing. This fight wasn't just about water, it was about respect. They messed with the wrong rancher, and they were about to find out that in Texas, you don't steal land from a man whose well runs deeper than your pockets. You might survive a land grab, but good luck living without water. Because what happened next? Well, let's just say, it involved the sheriff, the mayor, 3 plumbers, and a front-page newspaper story. And it all started with Cheryl pounding on my front door the very next morning. Cheryl pounded on my front door like she was the sheriff. I didn't rush to answer. I made sure to finish my coffee and set the cup down slowly before walking over and opening it with a calm smile. "What can I do for you, Cheryl?" She looked like a storm cloud wrapped in a floral dress. Her face was red, hair frizzy from stress, and her voice shot out like a whip. "You cut off our water." "No," I said. "I cut off my water. You just happened to be stealing it. That water belongs to the HOA." I stepped out onto the porch and pointed across the field, where the new green sign still stood crookedly in the dirt. "You mean on that dog park you built on my ranch without my permission?" Her eyes darted between me and the property, like she couldn't decide which one to yell at first. "The city approved that transfer. It's public property now." I pulled out a copy of the easement revocation notice and handed it to her. "City or no city, the water line still runs through my land. And this," I tapped the paper, "says you're trespassing and stealing resources. I've revoked access." She snatched the paper from my hand, read 2 lines, and tossed it back. "You'll regret this, Hank. You'll be hearing from our lawyers." "Looking forward to it," I said, stepping back inside and closing the door right in her face. I watched through the curtain as she stormed back to her car, tires kicking up a plume of dust as she sped off. But that was just the morning. By afternoon, the HOA went into full panic mode. I could see homeowners dragging garden hoses around like confused ants, wondering why their pressure was so low. A few folks even showed up in front of my property holding little signs that read, "Reconnect our water," and "This is illegal." I didn't respond. Instead, I called Mason, my son in Dallas. "Dad," he said, laughing as I told him what happened. "You turned off water for 80 HOA homes?" "Darn right I did. I'm proud of you, but you might want to be ready for a fight. These HOA types are snakes in makeup and khakis." I chuckled. "I've dealt with worse. Remember the time the coyotes took down our fence line in '03? Mason sighed. "All right, just promise me you'll keep everything legal." I promised him, but I already knew this wasn't going to stay clean for long. The next day, Cheryl made good on her threat. I was woken up at 7:15 a.m. by a code enforcement officer knocking at my door, clipboard in hand and a tight frown on his face. "Mr. Miller, we've received reports of illegal obstruction of public utilities." I stared at him, stunned. "Illegal? Sir, that's my well. They stole my land and put a dog park on it." He blinked. "You're saying the property belongs to you?" I led him to my shed, pulled out the land deeds, the water rights, the revocation form, and showed him the actual boundary markers. Big red steel stakes my grandfather had driven into the dirt when I was just a boy. The officer looked more and more uncomfortable the deeper he went through the paperwork. "This doesn't match what the HOA submitted to the city." "Exactly," I said. "I'm going to have to escalate this," he said. "I think you may have a case." But while he left more quietly than he arrived, Cheryl wasn't backing down. She filed an emergency injunction the next day, trying to force me to turn the water back on until the dispute was resolved. But they'd made one big mistake. They forged their way into claiming my land. And guess what? I had aerial photos from a drone company I hired last spring, long before the dog park was built, that showed my fence line, the boundary stakes, and even the irrigation lines. My lawyer filed a counterclaim that afternoon. Still, the HOA didn't take defeat well. On day 3, someone trespassed at night and tried to break open the lock on the water valve. They used bolt cutters, but failed. I found the broken pieces in the morning. That's when I installed cameras. Not just 1 or 2, but 10 trail cams all across the perimeter. Motion detecting, night vision, cloud synced. If they tried that again, I'd have their faces in 4K. That same afternoon, I got a visit from the mayor of Ashford. Yep, the mayor. He pulled up in a shiny black car, shook my hand, and asked if we could have a chat. I offered him a glass of sweet tea and we sat on my porch. "Mr. Miller," he said, "I understand you have a disagreement with Greenleaf Estates." "Disagreement?" I said. "They stole my land and water." He nodded slowly. "Look, I'm not saying what they did was right, but 80 homes don't have water, and the city is under pressure to resolve this quickly. Would you be willing to turn the water back on just temporarily?" "No," I said simply. He leaned in. "Even if we fast-track your legal case and ensure the land is returned." I paused. "You can guarantee that?" "We can start the process today." Now that gave me something to think about. But before I could make a decision, something happened that made everything worse. That night, while I was reviewing my camera feeds, I saw it. 3 people in dark hoodies crept across the field behind my barn. One carried a gas can. Another had a crowbar. The third had what looked like wire cutters. They weren't just there to steal water anymore. They were coming to sabotage. I bolted up from my chair and called the sheriff immediately. "Don't do anything crazy, Hank," he said. "We're sending a car now." But the trespassers were already at the pump house. I grabbed my boots, my flashlight, and my Remington shotgun, not to shoot anyone, but to make it clear that I wasn't about to be bullied. I crept outside, staying low behind the fence, heart racing as the figures tried prying open the metal box. Then one of them splashed something on the side of the panel. That's when I smelled it. Gasoline. They were going to burn it down. I stepped forward, flipped on my flashlight, and chambered a shell. "Hey, step away from my property!" The intruders froze. One dropped the can. Another ran. But the third? He turned toward me and lunged. And that's when everything changed. I didn't have time to think. The guy came charging toward me in the dark, swinging something shiny in his hand, a crowbar. I held my ground, aimed the shotgun low, and fired once into the dirt in front of him. Boom! The blast echoed across the ranch like thunder. He stopped dead in his tracks, eyes wide like a deer in headlights, then stumbled backward and took off running after the others. My legs trembled, but I didn't lower the shotgun until they were out of sight. I stood there for a long minute, heart pounding in my chest. Then I called the sheriff again. "Shots fired," I said. "Warning shot." But they tried to set fire to my pump house. This time, the response was quicker. Within 10 minutes, 2 patrol cars pulled up at the edge of my ranch, lights flashing in the darkness. I met them by the gate, showed them the gas can, the pry marks on the panel, and the crowbar that one of the punks had dropped while fleeing. The deputies took photos, collected evidence, and reviewed my camera footage. One of them, Deputy Lopez, a young guy with a crew cut and a calm voice, pulled me aside. "You realize this could have gone a lot worse, Mr. Miller." "I didn't want to hurt anyone," I said, "but I'm not going to let them burn down my water system." He nodded. "You were within your rights. You didn't shoot at them, and we've got everything on tape." "What now?" "We'll run the footage through facial recognition. Chances are, we'll know who they are by morning." Sure enough, by sunrise, I got a call from Sheriff McMillan himself. "We got 'em, Hank, all 3. 2 of them are HOA board members' kids, one's Cheryl's nephew." That didn't surprise me one bit. But the part that did? They're all facing charges: attempted arson, trespassing, property damage. I sat in silence for a second, then I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Thank you, Sheriff. You did the right thing. But listen, this is far from over. Cheryl's already trying to spin the story to the press, making it sound like you pulled a gun on some kids over a park." "She started a war," I said. "I'm just protecting what's mine. Stay sharp, and keep your cameras rolling." That day, everything shifted. What had started as a land dispute had now exploded into a public scandal. Local news stations showed up with cameras, buzzing drones, and microphones. One crew even tried to sneak onto the ranch for a better angle. I caught them and made them leave. The headline on the 6 p.m. news read, "HOA's dog park battle turns violent. Rancher fires warning shot as trespassers caught in act." And just like that, the tide began to turn in my favor. The public wasn't buying Cheryl's crocodile tears. People online were furious that she'd allowed teenagers to sneak onto private property and nearly commit arson. Support started pouring in. One morning, I opened my mailbox to find handwritten letters from all over the state. Some included gift cards. One rancher from West Texas sent me a brand new lockbox with a note that read, "Stay strong, brother." HOA crooks did the same thing to my dad back in '98. I even got an email from a nonprofit law firm that specialized in property rights. They offered free legal assistance. My own lawyer, Ms. Reyes, nearly cried tears of joy. "We have an army now, Hank," she said. But of course Cheryl wasn't done. With public support slipping through her fingers, she pulled a new stunt, a full-scale smear campaign. Suddenly, flyers started showing up on doors around the neighborhood. "Miller is a danger to the community. He pulled a gun on children. Revoke his land. Demand HOA take full control." And get this, she filed a petition to eminent domain my entire ranch. Yep. She tried to convince the city to seize the entire 40 acres and turn it into community green space. The gall of that woman. I'll admit, that one shook me. Eminent domain is no joke. It's meant for highways or utilities, not dog parks. But if you grease the right palms... I called Ms. Reyes in a panic. "We'll fight it," she said calmly. "She's bluffing. Eminent domain takes months, sometimes years. And the city would have to pay you fair market value, which they don't want to do. But can she start the process? Technically, yes. But legally, she's got no ground." Still, I knew I had to act fast. That's when I made the boldest move yet. If they wanted to try and take my land, I'd make it useless to them. So I called a backhoe operator I knew from across town and paid him cash to come out the next day. Together, we dug up the entire water main that connected the HOA's homes to my well. Every single inch. Then I filled the trench with concrete. I cut off their access forever. The city could fight me. The HOA could cry. But the pipeline was gone. If they wanted water now, they'd have to dig their own well, get permits, spend tens of thousands, and wait months for inspections. And you know what? That night I slept better than I had in weeks. Until the next morning, when I stepped out onto my porch and found a lawsuit taped to my front gate. The HOA was suing me for $5 million. I stood at the gate staring at the thick envelope flapping in the wind. The bold red letters on the front read, "Urgent Legal Notice." Inside was a stack of papers filed by the Greenleaf Estates HOA. They were suing me for $5 million in damages, claiming emotional distress, loss of community utility, destruction of infrastructure, and unlawful retaliation. I laughed. A dry, bitter kind of laugh. The kind that comes out when you're so furious, so fed up, that your body doesn't know what else to do. I carried the envelope inside and laid it on the table, called Ms. Reyes, told her what I found. "Don't panic," she said. "These people are desperate. We've seen this playbook. This is an intimidation tactic. $5 million, Maria. You could have lit their whole neighborhood on fire and they wouldn't get $5 million, she said flatly. Trust me, you've got the drone footage, the well rights, the easement termination, and now you've got video evidence of their people trying to commit arson. I sighed. So we fight? Oh, we fight, she said. We countersue. So we did. Within 48 hours, we hit them back with a $7 million countersuit for trespassing, vandalism, attempted arson, slander, and illegal seizure of land. It was war now, and the public was watching. A new article dropped on the local news site titled, "Rancher Fights Back, Greenleaf HOA Slammed with Countersuit After $5 Million Water War." Cheryl's face was plastered on every story, looking like a deer caught in headlights. Her once proud image as a community leader crumbled overnight. People in her own neighborhood started turning on her. One man, a retired veteran named Carl who'd lived in Greenleaf Estates for a decade, marched up to the HOA office and demanded a full board meeting. "I've known Hank for years," he shouted. "You people broke the law, and now you're spending our dues trying to sue him?" Carl wasn't alone. A group of residents, angry about losing their water and being dragged into an expensive legal mess, began circulating a petition to dissolve the HOA board. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, I kept a low profile. But I wasn't idle. I spent my days reinforcing fences, planting fresh wildflowers around the property border, and installing 2 solar-powered water pumps, one for the ranch and one for backup. I even got a call from Mason. "Dad, your story's gone viral. You're all over Reddit." "Reddit?" I asked. "Yeah. Some guy uploaded your drone photos and security cam footage. There's a post with over 10,000 upvotes. The title is, 'HOA tried to steal my dad's ranch for a dog park, so he cut off their water.' You're a hero." I chuckled. Never thought I'd be famous for turning off a faucet. But fame didn't protect me from what happened next. Late one night, just as I was drifting off to sleep, my security system pinged. Motion detected. I opened the app, and my blood went cold. Flames. A section of dry brush on the far edge of my property was on fire. Someone had lit it. I grabbed my phone, called 911, and sprinted outside with a fire extinguisher. But the wind was strong and the flames were climbing fast. By the time the fire department arrived, a 20-foot section of fencing had burned, and the edge of my hay barn was scorched. One more gust, and I would have lost the whole thing. Thankfully, the firemen contained it. They stayed an extra hour helping me soak the soil and checking for hot spots. When the sheriff arrived, I showed him the footage. Another hooded figure, gas can, torch. It was attempted arson, again. But this time they didn't get away. Because just before lighting the fire, the idiot looked up and pulled down his mask. Probably because it was hot. The camera got a perfect shot of his face. "Name's Mitchell Harris," the deputy said. "We'll pick him up before sunrise." "Who is he?" I asked. "Cheryl's nephew." Again. Same kid who tried to sabotage the pump house. This wasn't random vandalism. This was targeted harassment. And it was clear they weren't going to stop. The next morning, I filed for a temporary restraining order against Cheryl and any HOA board member or associate from stepping foot on or near my property. And I issued a public statement. I didn't hold back. I explained everything. The fake land grab, the forgery, the stolen water, the attacks, the lawsuits. And the moment I dropped the fire footage online, things exploded. Thousands of people rallied behind me. A GoFundMe that someone started on my behalf reached $80,000 in 3 days. Cheryl's inbox was flooded with angry emails. Her fellow board members began resigning one by one. The pressure became too much. But right when I thought things might finally settle down, I got a knock on the door. This time, it wasn't Cheryl. It was the State Water Commission. Turns out Cheryl had one last card to play. She reported me for illegal alteration of a public water source. Even though the pipeline had been revoked, she claimed the removal of the pipes and the pouring of concrete violated some obscure state code. The investigator was polite, but firm. "We just need to verify everything was done by the book. Mind if we take a look?" I let them inspect the site. But while they were walking the property, one of them knelt down near the old well and frowned. "This cap here," he said, tapping the concrete plug. "Did you install this yourself?" "I paid a licensed contractor." "Did you get a permit for the concrete pour?" I froze. "No." His brow furrowed. "That might be a problem." My heart sank. Had I just walked into a trap? They took photos, made notes, and promised to follow up. That night, I sat on my porch under the stars, the weight of it all finally hitting me. I'd stood my ground. I'd defended my land. I'd exposed the HOA's corruption. But I might have just given them the technicality they needed to finish me. The very next morning, a notice arrived in the mail. I was being fined $25,000 by the state. And that wasn't even the worst part. The penalty also came with a cease and desist order. Until the concrete cap was inspected and cleared, I couldn't access my own well. I was officially cut off. No water, no pumps, no irrigation. They had found a way to shut me down. I stood in my kitchen, gripping the notice so tight my knuckles turned white. A $25,000 fine, a cease and desist, and worst of all, they'd found a way to cut me off from my own water. I couldn't believe it. After everything the HOA had done, stealing land, forging documents, trespassing, arson, I was the one now facing state penalties. I felt like I'd been kicked in the gut. I called Ms. Reyes right away. She didn't waste a second. "This is a technicality, Hank. That concrete cap wasn't dangerous, and you didn't damage any shared lines, but you poured without a permit, and that gave them a sliver of leverage. So what now?" "We appeal the fine immediately," she said, "and I'm calling in an environmental inspector to certify the work. If they approve it, we can get the cease and desist lifted." I thanked her, but truthfully I was shaken. For the first time since this war started, I felt like maybe, just maybe, they were going to beat me. By noon, news of the fine hit the local media. And wouldn't you know it, Cheryl was already out there in front of cameras again. Her voice oozed fake sympathy as she said, "We've always just wanted what's best for the community. It's unfortunate Mr. Miller has chosen to escalate this situation." She had the nerve to act like I was the aggressor. I nearly threw my remote at the TV. But then something happened I didn't expect. Supporters rallied again, but this time harder. A local plumbing company offered to inspect and certify my entire water system for free. A contractor volunteered to rebuild my pump housing and fix any permit issues, also at no charge. Ranchers from 2 counties over drove up to help restore my burned fence line. One man, an old-timer named Roy with a voice like gravel, shook my hand and said, "We take care of our own in Texas. These HOA buzzards messed with the wrong ranch." That small show of support lit a fire in me. I wasn't just defending my land anymore. I was standing up for every landowner who'd been bullied, swindled, or steamrolled by folks in pressed khakis who thought rules only applied to others. 3 days later, the environmental inspector arrived. A quiet man named Wallace with thick glasses and a clipboard. He walked the site, measured distances, tested soil, took water samples. I stayed out of his way and let him work. At the end of the day, he walked up to me and said, "I'll file the report tomorrow, but everything looks solid. You did it right. They're gonna have to lift the order. I shook his hand, smiling for the first time in days. Ms. Reyes filed the appeal. By the end of the week, the state dropped the fine entirely and lifted the cease and desist. I had water again. And Cheryl? She'd finally backed herself into a corner, because all her efforts had done was shine a spotlight on her lies. Then came the breaking point. One of Cheryl's own board members leaked a series of internal emails. In them, Cheryl admitted to knowing the land still legally belonged to me, even before they built the dog park. She told the others to, "Go ahead anyway, he's old, he won't fight back." She even used HOA funds to pay off a city clerk to push through the fake paperwork. The leak went viral overnight. The local news ran a segment titled, "Exposed, Greenleaf HOA President Caught in Land Grab Cover-Up." That's when the hammer dropped. The city launched an official investigation. The HOA board was dissolved within the week. Cheryl was arrested for fraud, bribery, and conspiracy to commit property theft. I watched from my porch as they took her away in cuffs, red lipstick smeared, hair a mess, screaming something about how the media twisted everything. No one came to her defense. As for the land, the city sent a formal letter restoring full legal ownership of the 12 stolen acres back to me. And because the HOA had caused so much damage building that dog park without permission, they had to pay restitution. The best part? They didn't have enough funds to cover it, so they had to auction off the HOA office, golf carts, and even the fancy sign at the entrance to Greenleaf Estates. Guess who bought that sign for $20? I mounted it on my barn with a new coat of paint that read, "Welcome to Greenleaf Dog Park, open daily, courtesy of Hank." But just when I thought the chaos was behind me, another letter arrived in the mail. This one wasn't from a lawyer or city office. It was from Mitchell Harris, Cheryl's nephew, the kid who tried to burn down my pump house. He was serving time at a juvenile facility, and the letter was handwritten. It read, "Mr. Miller, I'm sorry. I didn't know what we were doing was that serious. My aunt told me it was just a protest. I never meant to scare you or cause damage. I see now how wrong it was. I'm trying to turn my life around. I hope one day you can forgive me. Mitchell." I sat down for a long time after reading it, because despite everything that had happened, the stress, the fights, the sleepless nights, that letter reminded me why I never gave up. It wasn't just about land or water. It was about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. And that kid? He still had a chance. But just as I was ready to close this chapter, something strange happened. My mailbox was empty for 2 days. Then, on the 3rd day, I found a new envelope. Unmarked, no return address. Inside was a photo of my ranch, taken from above. In the corner, someone had scribbled a note in thick black ink. "This isn't over." I stared at the photo in my hands, a recent aerial shot of my ranch. It was taken from high above, probably by drone, and printed on glossy paper. But it wasn't the photo that rattled me. It was the message scrawled in thick, messy black marker on the bottom corner. "This isn't over." No name. No return address. Just a threat. Silent and creepy. I scanned the sky that day like a hawk, looking for any drones buzzing above. I checked my security cams. I even walked the fence line twice, but there was no sign of anyone. Still, I knew what this meant. Someone, probably one of Cheryl's old allies, was still out there, bitter, watching. Maybe they blamed me for the HOA getting dissolved. Maybe they were mad that I stood my ground and won. Either way, I wasn't afraid. I just upgraded my cameras again, added a few solar-powered floodlights, and put up new signs around the property. "Private ranch. Trespassers will be prosecuted." A few neighbors even came by to show support. Carl, the veteran from the neighborhood, brought me a cooler of root beer and said, "Don't let that scare you, Hank. You did what every honest man should have done. You fought back with dignity." I nodded. "I'm not scared. I just don't want this to keep going." But you know what? Life slowly returned to normal. The city cleaned up the mess left by the fake dog park. I reseeded the land and turned it into a wildflower field. Within weeks, bees were buzzing, and butterflies danced through the grass again. The ranch was peaceful. Mason visited with his wife and 2 kids. They rode horses, roasted marshmallows, and camped under the stars. My grandson told me, "Grandpa, this place is awesome. It's like a castle with cows." And I smiled, because that's what it was. Mine. A legacy, protected. One day, while repairing the roof of the hay barn, I got a call from Ms. Reyes. "Thought you'd want to hear this," she said. "Cheryl pleaded guilty in court today." I sat down on the ladder step. "All of it?" "Yep. Fraud, bribery, illegal seizure of land. She struck a deal. Minimal jail time, but she's banned from holding any public or HOA leadership position again. For life." I let out a long breath. "Justice," I said. "She got what she deserved," Reyes replied. "And you? You got your land, your water, and your peace back." And I did. But I also got something else. Respect. People from all over the country started emailing me, ranchers, homeowners, even small-town folks with similar stories. Some were fighting their own HOA battles. Others just wanted to say, "Thank you." So if you're listening to this, and you're going through something similar, maybe your neighborhood board is trying to bully you, maybe someone's messing with your land or taking what's not theirs, remember this: stand your ground. Stay calm. Document everything. And never ever let anyone convince you that you don't have a right to protect what's yours. Because one man with the truth and a strong backbone is worth more than 100 signatures on a forged document. Now, before I go feed the cows, let me ask you for a favor. If you enjoyed this story, please give the video a thumbs up. It helps a lot more than you think. Drop your opinion in the comment section below. What would you have done if you were in my boots? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories just like this one, full of twists, justice, and a little Texas grit. Thanks for watching. This is Hank from Miller Acres signing off. And remember, don't mess with a rancher, especially not one who controls your water.